Hi, Marta.
언니, 안녕.
Hi, George.
Hey, welcome everyone for tonight's Impact Collective AMA session with George, Marta, and me, Uni. We'll discuss and deliver our personal opinions on how a community-driven accelerator works, why the future of work and business is community, and why being together is better. Please note that this session will be recorded and shared publicly on Impact Collective's YouTube and other social media channel for an information sharing purpose. For those who are new to Impact Collective, I'd like to quickly introduce Impact Collective to you all. Impact Collective is a community-driven investment and acceleration project for impact-driven startups focusing on opportunities in Asia. We invest in, supports, and connects startups that are solving global challenges to accelerate positive impact in the world. So we provide a meaningful network of ecosystem stakeholders as well as financial opportunities. So now I'll move on to our amazing panelists today. So we have George here, head of community at Draper Startup House, a regional anchor partner of Impact Collective. And we have Marta here, community lead at Impact Collective and founder of Seoul Startups, which is the biggest international startup community in Seoul. And me, Eunielle, today, partner at Impact Collective and TheVentures, and also co-founder of CanLab, providing community as a service type of tech solutions, and also a technical partner of Impact Collective. So to start with, why don't you, our panelists, sharing your own journey in the startup community and giving us a quick self-introduction. Over to you, George.
All right. Hi. Yeah, so my name is George. I've been with Draper Startup House for the last about 18 months. And I originally came to Singapore about 2 years ago now. And my journey into the startup ecosystem started in Melbourne, Australia, when I used to work for a co-working space there. That was back in around 2014. That's when I first heard about the term community manager back then. And then I realized that I could actually create a career out of building communities, and I was hooked. And of course, startup ecosystems and communities, it's something that's always going to be around. It developed into me moving into the corporate space because I wanted to see how they do it also at a larger scale. And then I found myself back in the startup ecosystem after that when I moved to Singapore. And yeah, now I'm here and helping others as well to build out their communities and connect as many people as possible. And that's how I then entered the space of the wonderful Impact Collective.
Thank you. And Marta, can you give us your quick intro and the stories for the startup community building stuff?
Yes. Well, first of all, hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us on Friday, almost Friday evening for, I think, most of you. My name is Marta, and originally I'm from Poland, Europe, but I've been living in Korea for about the last 12, give or take 12 years. I used to work for Samsung Electronics, and that's where I thought I would stay forever and ever, but life changed and I ended up drifting onto the startup scene. I worked in an accelerator, I worked in a startup, and then I started working around startups, both as a freelancer, as a community builder. My journey with the community, this startup community specifically, happened really by accident, or to be more exact, in a bar, when with a couple of expats and Koreans working in startups here in Seoul, we were just drinking and pretty much bad-mouthing the Korean startup scene, complaining like that there was no community, there were no events, especially no events in English, everything was blah. And we were, well, by the end of the night, after a few beers, we decided that the best course of action would be actually taking an action instead of just sitting there and bitching about everything. And that's how we started Seoul Startups, which 3 years ago, that's when we started. And now after 3 years, we're over 1,500 members and growing. And what started as a casual Slack group is still casual, still fun with a lot of memes and GIFs, but bigger and more important, and most of all, recognized on the Korean startup scene. So welcome, everybody.
Thank you. And lastly, I'm Eunielle, and I myself is an entrepreneur as well. So an entrepreneur and a change maker right now, building the future through tech innovations. So I'm a co-founder of CanLab, and prior to CanLab, I was in mostly business strategies and entrepreneur path as a founder or co-founder. So from digital transformation of many different sectors, and also the mobile gaming industry and consumer goods, branding and brands, I as a serial entrepreneur, I experienced it a lot. That this community thing, and especially decentralized organization can contribute, how much they can contribute to the real world business. So that is the for me till the another journey to the Can Lab, which is building the community alliance network, and providing the community as a service solutions to a lot of different types of organizations or services, building like help build their communities or community design governance into their service. Yes. So, well, to start with our today's topic, I mean, it's a bit of like different and new concept that we bring all this like community driven or community led accelerator model. So why don't we start talking about what is the community for the startups and business, and then we can cover the second part as our new model of community driven accelerator. Who want to start with the key reason driving you guys to help build communities for entrepreneurs out of many other aspects of business development?
Maybe Marta first this time.
Okay, thank you, George. I wanted to kind of backtrack a little bit before starting to talk about the startup community, more to mention a little bit about community itself, because I think for the longest of time, communities have been a little bit misunderstood, a little bit because of historic reasons, a little bit because of what they are and are not. I think especially here in the startup world, maybe it's specific to Korea, maybe to other countries as well, a lot of people misinterpret communities as a kumbaya sort of gathering of people just, patting themselves on the shoulders and doing a lot of talking, not doing a lot of action, which what hopefully George and myself will prove to you is quite the opposite. In Korea, on the Korean startup scene, for the longest of time, there was this perception that communities are not needed, that everything for the startups can be given and created either by the government or the corporation. But as time has proven, that serves a purpose up to a certain point, to a certain growth of the ecosystem. And after that, you'd also need some sort of a support system that is not structured as a government. It has to be something coming from the people for the people. Because at the end of the day, in case of the government and also corporate workers, they only see one side of the story. They're sitting across the desk from you. They're not there in the fight with you. And that's why I think it is important to cherish and nurture the communities, different kinds of communities on our local and global startup scenes.
Yeah.
I hope that sort of covers everything. I might have backtracked a little bit.
Is it okay if I add to that?
Awesome. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so, I would definitely agree with Marta on the misunderstandings of community as well. My personal view on community is actually a lot of people confuse communities and networks in particular. A lot of the times people who are building networks are calling it community because it's, you know, pretty trendy at the moment. But the way that I differentiate them between them is networks are usually large and they scale very well, but they have very loose relationships. They're very transactional, right? So you can go to an event and, you know, connect with a lot of people, but when you go back home afterwards, you might not have anything to do with them. As opposed to a community where, you know, the relationships are generally a lot more intimate and tighter. And generally they do form smaller clusters, right? Like a network can have multiple communities, but usually a community is a different type of, it's like a small world network. And so with that, I always will ask people, you know, it's like, are you looking to build a community or a network? If it's a community, you're going to be looking at a much longer time frame, because exactly what Marta was talking about, you know, a government can build up a network very fast. You know, just contact everybody that you know, connect them up and you got your numbers. Whereas a community, these are the ones who will move beyond the transactional relationship. They'll do things that moves into the realm of social capital, which isn't as easily trackable or measurable. And that's why I think in the business realm, it hasn't been given enough, I guess, focus, because it has been difficult to actually track social capital in general. But that is changing, right? A lot of technologies are coming out that's actually able to track some of these social interactions, behaviors, et cetera, online at least. And I think in the future, if we start moving towards like smart devices and things, yeah, there's going to be even more insights there that I think a lot of community builders know intuitively, but for the business world, we have to prove through numbers. So yeah, just, you know, to add on to Marta, very much agree there.
Wow, thank you. Well, yeah, that's very, you know, a valid point about how community is differently defined in different sector and different words. Yeah, I totally agree that, you know, also I usually say that, you know, community is a kind of like a group of people, like enthusiastic people who share their common goals together, you know, to achieve something together as a community. It's a totally different from the network perspective.
And an
Yes,
identity too, right?
right, right. So from that angle, then um, how can the early stage teams or innovators benefit from the community? I mean, their own communities, or like, you know, even like a wider other communities of already available for them, you know, how they can benefit from it.
George, this is your turn.
Sure, sure. Yeah, I mean, I think the easiest for startups is, you know, if you look at, of course, Silicon Valley, right? Like with Silicon Valley, they have their own sort of culture that community, if you want to call it, is defined by, where it's always pay it forward, right? So people can be quite helpful in terms of connecting you up with other people. So it accelerates your ability to connect. The relationships, or the strength of relationships, can ensure also that whoever is being passed on, you know, to you as a founder is actually good, right? Because there's a reputational risk there if you do find yourself in a good, strong, productive community. And so, yeah, by joining a community as such, you'll be able to just accelerate your ability to get things done. So I think, to, you know, both of you guys' points about like, you know, being enthusiastic, action oriented, having shared goals, I think it just allows you to be more productive in that sense when you do find a community that's, yeah, that's focused there.
Yeah, what do you think, Marta?
Well, I obviously I agree with George. How would I not? And kind of to add on that, with I think an ecosystem, a startup ecosystem with a strong community culture, nurtures and curates innovators and entrepreneurs who are more oriented to giving first rather than getting first. And I think this is especially important with the young generation of startuppers growing up, that we focus on kind of nurturing that new generation, and but also teaching the old generation, like teaching old dogs new tricks. Sometimes it works. For the startups themselves, like a more, I would say, tangible, other than just teaching that mindset of giving first to the community instead of always getting first from the society. I think another most important thing is that you're just around people who understand you, who have been through this themselves or are going through the same troubles themselves, so they understand you much better than anyone else. They can answer all your questions much better because of that, and also because they share the same values, the similar identities. At the end of the day, it's easier for you to find a team or a tribe of people which will either turn into a company if it's around a product or an idea, or maybe it will turn up into another community, which is also great and amazing and something we should always cheer on.
Yes, totally agreed. Yeah, so like, is it, do you think it's possible to build a new community for each services or each startups? I
We'll
mean,
just take turns. You go.
I mean,
yeah,
I think it's possible. The question is, are you ready to put in the effort and the energy into doing that? Like George mentioned, despite what a lot of people think in the startup ecosystem, building and growing and then curating a community is not easy. Like, it's like building a cult. I know it's on documentaries at Netflix, it seems like you just show up and they follow you. No, it's a lot of effort, and you have to put in a lot of effort every day for people to, in the case of a cult, to believe in you, but in case of a community, to believe in all those values and offers that you have for them. So you have, and because you're a startup and you have limited resources, both when it comes to people, energy, and money, you kind of have to decide, like, is community a necessity for my product at this moment, or should I focus on something else? And I guess that's with everything related to startup and creating a new product at the end of the day.
right. Because I asked this question because you know, get a lot of questions from startup teams or other VCs that, you know, about the building communities of their own service or brands. But I think that, you know, community is not a buildable thing because it's a very organic, because of its organic nature. We have to, I mean, listen to them, and we have to nurture them, and we have to embracing them. But like, you know, obviously it's not different from, it's totally different from building a service. So it needs maybe different kind of efforts and time and resources as well. So for that end, I come up with this idea that, you know, the community business fit. As Marta already said, you have to think about that, you know, your service or your products really need the community factor or not. If it's not, then you don't have to, you know, consume your time or energy to build it. But if it's necessary, then you have to obviously think about the community business fit, which is not kind of like a, you know, awkward activities or add-on services, but more like, you know, naturally fit into your service or product line, so that the product itself, the service itself, can create a group of community. So well, George and Marta, do you have any good examples of community business fit?
Community business fit. community business fit. I think, well, I think touching on first, I think you're very much right about like it's important for a business to understand why they want to build a community first. Because yeah, I've also had the same questions from, you know, prospects, clients, potential clients, right? They're like, oh, you know, everybody's building a community, especially during COVID, right? I noticed a lot of people like just wanting to, you know, try and pull everything online and be like, okay, I need to build a community, not really knowing what that meant. But in terms of community business fit, I would say right now, a really good one actually is the kind of cook at home type businesses. So I've noticed actually a lot of PTs, personal trainers, and even some people who just enjoyed cooking. They started, you know, baking and stuff on Instagram, and then they realized they were getting a lot of interest, and a lot of people were then asking for their recipes. Then they started building the recipes for those people. Then all of a sudden, you had other folks who were coming in and liking that style of cooking, and then very quickly, as a following, you know, would start to grow. So I think health, food. Those ones are very much suited to community business fit, because you can create a lot of different products out of that or from
Right.
that. And probably off the top of my head, gaming, you know, games, very
Sure.
much a very easy one.
They have guild and they have families.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Very well suited.
Right. How about Marta? Do you have any like examples?
Well, when Jordan was talking about cooking, I automatically, and gaming as well, I automatically thought it's not a startup, but you know, CrossFit is all about community. It started
Right.
as a community in a garage and has become one of the most popular cross-functional training philosophies, communities, you name it. They've had a lot of hiccups. I think it's like I know it's, again, it's not particularly a startup, but I think it's a good place to kind of follow CrossFit's story, because they have had a lot of a very interesting journey from the beginning, with a lot of hiccups along the way, a few fuck ups, a few failures, but they still exist and they're still pretty strong even during COVID. So they're a good reference, if anything. On top of that, I would also say any startups, IT companies that grew out of like developer communities, they usually are very good at having their own communities following as well. Like for instance, Slack or GitHub, they're literally Reddit. They're literally built out of the necessity of having a community. And that's the biggest value that they offer to their customers as well, to themselves internally, but also to their customers. I kind of want to add on to what Inya said before she asked the question. I think if you want to have a community, if you want to build a community, you have to make sure that that community is genuine. Like it cannot be there because it has to address a product. It has to be there because people want it to be there. And if you're thinking whether your product or your service needs a community, I would say start with already existing communities and kind of tap into those members, talk to them, see if they would be interested in becoming members or followers. And if so, then you can go on and think about creating your own thing. If not, then just keep on hijacking the existing communities, because that's what they're really for.
Right. Very, very, very good comment and hacking tips. Yeah, well, I also think about a lot of other examples of the product community fit or business community fit, especially for the services with local business, like connecting local businesses or local informations. They also have their, a genuine local community within their service or product as well. So Yeah, and also a lot of other like review types of services. And as George said, the content consuming services, like, you know, those kind of like services are genuinely making a group of shared identity people, and that actually after that that comes like a community as well. So for that kind of a thing, well, we extend the idea of communities business fit into the community investment fit. And now that's why we created this impact collective together. So likewise, the services are needed a lot of different ideas and different voices and different commitments from the community. It can be pure customers or pure just supporter, idea supporters, or some early stage investors of their startup. But anyway, they need a lot of like, you know, behind, like help behind their services from this community. And that actually comes into our like headquarter team's mind as well. And we thought maybe this kind of like approach can be workable for the investment decisions, and also accelerating a new startup business as well. So moving on to how this community-led accelerator works. Well, I know that George and Marta, you guys also have some experiences of a lot of different acceleration programs so far. So do you think there are some limitations that the current venture capitals or accelerator model has?
I forgot who went last. Marta, me? Okay, I guess I'll go. uh, yeah, so one thing that I'm currently seeing at the moment is the idea of a rolling fund. The founder of Gumroad, if you guys haven't heard of Gumroad before, just putting the link in the chat box. So Gumroad, essentially because of COVID, things have been moving towards a lot of people wanting to disrupt the whole VC model. And the rolling funds seem to be working a lot better because the VC model, investment model can be very slow and painstaking, right? And because, you know, people are more remote now, investor meetings are all happening via Zoom. People are trying to find, you know, better, safer, more trustworthy ways to be able to get money in and also track and be accountable. So I think in terms of, how things are shifting in that sense, we're seeing some movements there. There's an article, a few articles or discussions on Twitter happening just this last week called hashtag exit to community. So instead of startups exiting to, you know, through an IPO to Wall Street or to other corporations, you know, being acquired, it's how can you actually exit to the people that matter the most, that use your product, right? The community. And so, you know, seeing this, I always use Twitter as a sort of like signal, right? To see like what's coming up. And seeing that is very much in line with what you guys are doing here with the Impact Collective. There's more talk now about the importance of community. And I think it just goes back to sort of actually traditional values, right? The importance of like a functional family as opposed to a dysfunctional family, up to a functional community. And then that just kind of trickles out. And I think if we can provide more investment flow in a way that isn't soul draining or taking too much time, but still get to the right places as needed, then it's going to be here to stay for a good while.
Thank you. Marta?
Thank you, George. Well, I think this year is a blessing in disguise for new investment models and disrupting the whole investment ecosystem, because I think that when it comes to the limitations of traditional models, it was usually because the investment decisions were made by people who did not have the whole picture, did not only stood from the investor position, right? And numerous times, I'm pretty sure most of you here had that moment when you were listening to a demo day or a pitching competition, and after the decisions made either by the investors or by the judges, we were like, well, if it were me, I would have chosen differently, right? And I think that's why with Impact Collective, we want to change that yes, the investors have their knowledge mostly centered about finance and capital, but a business, a startup is much more than that, especially in these days. And we want to share that decision making with everybody that is somehow connected with the startup, the accelerator partners, obviously the investors, the experts, but also the community, the end users, the people that will be actually using that service or that product. Because they also should have the possibility to say that I want this thing to be developed. I want to see it. I want to be using it. I'll buy it, and give me that opportunity to do it. So, and I think with COVID and with the fact that traditional meetings are out of the window at the moment, traditional ways of communication are out of the window. I think this is the opportunity for ideas like ours to come up and flourish, and to prove to the more traditionalist world that this is community is the new black.
Wow. Yeah, actually the next question was like, how can the community governance or collective decision design resolve the limitations? And I think, you guys already covered that part. So on top of it, I'm gonna add a little bit of a point that how this kind of like a collective design can resolve some of the limitations of the conventional VC industry, is that like obviously the market validation, so the market validation is always very difficult. So that is why international deals are like very hard to close, because the in-house expertise, they do not actually deeply know about the other markets or other regions, business culture or business ecosystems and structure. But using this collective design, that we can actually, ask the local experts what the startup team's strengths are and what the weak points are, so we can get the direct validation information from them. I mean, they're kind of like a very curated members of our community. So they're not just a nobody, and they know the business, they know the market, and they know how to run the entrepreneurial journey, and they know how to invest in, and how to secure the capital. So they can actually give us a lot of their 10 to 15 years of knowledge and insights through this collective model. So I think that is the most out of our community design, especially for this Impact Collective. So, well, then let's go to the next question. The question 6 will be the, the technical questions, that what kind of things that we will need technically to support this kind of design. I mean, it doesn't have to be the IT technical solution, but more like the governance design wise. What kind of tools, or what kind of actions that we need, and what kind of the guidelines, or what kind of framework that we need for this community-led acceleration model works.
I think it's my turn to go ahead. So I will start actually with a what can I say, non-software tool that I really like, and that I use with Seoul startups, and that we also have been using with Impact Collective, called community canvas, which I'll post the link in a second once I'm done. It's a framework that lets you, first of all, kind of, in a sense, yes, design your community, but also keep yourself and your community organizers, community leaders accountable to what you set up to do, to the goals and values that you're out there to do. And it's also a good way to kind of put into a picture what really is very elusive, because at the end of the day, yes, communities are, you cannot really define a community perfectly, but with a community canvas, it's a way to kind of make sure that everybody that's involved, all the stakeholders, all the governance related people in your group, but also the members are more or less on the same page. When it comes to more software tools, I think I don't know if it's the model itself that requires it. I mean, yes, this does require itself, but also because of COVID, I think we have to acknowledge and embrace all the online tools. But also I would say use the tools that encourage over communication, because I think it's very important in a community, and especially if it's online community, because it has to be a space where people feel comfortable to talk, to interact, to share their ideas, and not feel left out of the loop or anything. So I would say all the Slacks and related similar tools are your friend. Go ahead and use them, and all the plugins that you can, especially the Jiffy one. I recommend a lot for communication purposes.
Yeah, I'd probably echo. I was actually gonna bring up Community Canvas, and Marta, for you, I put the link in the Zoom chat. So yeah, that's definitely one. I think that's really one of the few that has been put out to help with sort of community structure, community governance. But there's a lot of examples that I often take from just other older sort of groups, institutions. If you actually look at even the way that like education institutions, religions have been set up, if you actually look at their structures there, it has been very good in terms of intergenerational community building, right? Right now, it's a hot topic, so we're kind of reinventing the wheel a lot, but there's so much wisdom that can be learned from the past when you look at how they've structured things. And so we are obviously in the startup or business world just trying to translate that into more businessy language. So I don't necessarily think we need anything new. It's more of like wrapping what has worked for generations in a way that makes sense for this audience we now have. Because again, as community builders, I think we know how to create governance systems and co-create that with the community, right? And that is actually custom for each one. But of course, there are patterns. And I think the patterns are, very basic things like, rituals, rhythms, and setting those type of things up, a sense of identity, vision, which you would have in a business anyways. And so that sense of community, I think, is what a lot of businesses are aiming for these days, even if it might not necessarily be one, because people are seeking identity, a lot of the time. And so, from a technical side, any essentially like messenger app or communication tool right now allows you to be able to group people together and communicate. I would say on the over communication bit, although I know what you mean, Marta, and I agree with that. I think we are having an inverse problem right now where I think some people get overwhelmed with too much communications happening across multiple channels. And I don't think that's anyone's fault. It's just the nature of the technology where we think we need to have like every single social media app, especially as community builders, right? We probably have managed more channels than the average person. So unless you don't. But like for me, I generally am I don't get too bombarded, but with my community members, I note that a lot of the times they say I get overwhelmed, even though they have the option to adjust their notifications. They tend to drop off of multiple platforms because they feel like these platforms are too overwhelming. There's too much communication happening. So I think, again, from a governance standpoint, this I see more as a cultural thing But with your community, you set your own guidelines, right? Your code of conduct, your behaviors that you want that suits that identity, that culture, etc. And I think from there, it makes it far more easy to be able to communicate in an effective way. So as an example, there's one community I have called the Pack, which is based on productivity alone. So we have very specific channels for different types of things. So we have a venting channel where people have permission to vent. Otherwise, you get venting everywhere, which you can see in Twitter, Reddit, and it's actually quite unproductive. That's over communication in the wrong areas. Whereas psychological safety, I think Marta talked about that too, is very important. I think at the end of the day, that's what you're trying to achieve with community is psychological safety and trust. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, actually, from that kind of perspective, we create this ICC, the Impact Collective community. So it's kind of like a, what can I say, concentrated communication center for all the stakeholders of the program, so that we do not need a multi-different platforms to jump in and jump out. And also we have this identity system that, like, everybody have their own label, like judges or experts and impact makers, which is the startup teams. And also the partners are also labeled too, like growth partners, investment partners, and so that you can easily find out who's who and what kind of roles you can expect from them, and or what kind of request or help to ask. And also we have this beautiful voting mechanism so that we can deliver this community design as well. So the voting will be happen from the main round period. So it will be open up like the last week of September on our ICC. So anyone who has community judge or the partner judge or fellow judge can cast their vote for the startup they support. And also the startups who participate in this program, they have all the direct access to the expert, the world-class expert that we have, like over 100 experts that we have. You can directly reach out to them and ask anything what you want and what you can solve together. But then also as a reward for their time and efforts, the startups actually can give the appreciation token to the experts as well. So this will eventually at the end of the whole investment activities, and when the fund get the return, then we will share the return with the community as well, the experts and the contributors who actually nurture the startup together. So this kind of like a technical mechanism is also behind the whole program, so that this is not a transactional relationship between the experts or the partners and the startups, but also we do appreciate their times and their insights and their contributions as well. So this is more like a tokens for their contributions. And also this can be a mutual evaluation process. So usually, the startups do not have any chance to evaluate VCs, right? Or to evaluate their mentors. But this can be another way of the reverse evaluation from startups to experts. So this kind of like a new experiments that we really want to try and achieve is through this whole program of Impact Collective 2020. Well, I'd like to hear, what would be the best scenario you guys can expect from Impact Collective as a new community-driven accelerator model? Marta?
It's my turn again. Oh, sorry. I was waiting for George, but I think, I mean, other than everything is amazing in Impact Collective, at least what I have in my head is amazing, sounds amazing, and is going to be amazing. I think the most important thing for me personally is that really the community has the say and has the power to make decisions, to evaluate the startups, and um, and to participate in the decision process. The unique thing that I think you briefly mentioned was that there are also judges that represent the community who have the voting power and almost on par with the VCs and the partners, the accelerators. And I think this is very unique and something that has not happened in any other sort of program of
Mm-hmm.
this caliber. I heard someone a few days ago. Actually, he might be on this call. Sorry, Mario, if I'm stealing your phrase. But what Mario said was that Impact Collective is like a choose your own adventure. Like we remember back in the days, there used to be those um, Indiana Jones books before there were the movies where you could actually choose your own adventure after each chapter. Well, this is pretty much the same with Impact Collective. Whoever, whether you're a startup, whether you're a VC, whether you're an accelerator, you're choosing your adventure in this whole process. Yes, you may come in to the whole program originally as say a startup, but through the whole process, you can end up also being a judge, also being an investor, also being an expert in a certain field. And I think that's just great.
Yeah, everything Marta said. I think what I'll be interested to see over time too is how you guys can actually measure the impact that the community you have under Impact Collective impacts the actual success of the startups, or those that are contained within. Like we were talking about, walking the talk with any venture that we have, very important, because then that'll naturally just be talked about with others outside. And I think to see the community acceleration would be good to see how even with the ventures, we can actually accelerate the community building power of those startups. Not just the way of using the community to help that startup, but then also how to, if they are building a community or have one already, how you're actually going to be accelerating that, because I think that will be a key, because I don't think anybody really has a community accelerator. There's like community powered or community driven things, but an actual community accelerator, very few have that yet.
Wow, that's really interesting point, and we definitely need to implement it into our program as well. Yeah. So, yeah, my perspective and like personal perspective for this Impact Collective is that, like, I really want to see how this community judges and community members can contribute to the overall business aspect of the startups. I mean, once we can prove this, then this kind of a community building thing can be another business sector, and also can be viewed, looked into as a very valuable. I mean, even if it's a time-consuming job, but still, it's a very like market valuable kind of like a aspect. So I really want to see that kind of like immersion from our community, and I see a lot of like enthusiasts who actually commit their time and network to bring the best out of this community as well. So this can be very exciting experiment for even from our side as well. And also I'd like to see the point where we can redistribute the community carry to our community members. I think this can be very radical movement. I know, I mean, from my knowledge, I don't think any VCs ever done this kind of like a carry redistribution to out of their house So it can be a little bit of a challenging for the legal perspective, but we will figure out how to manage it. And I'd like to see that moment and, open up the champagne together with all this working community members together. Yeah, so this is, I think, we cover all the topics today that we want to share. But George and Marta, do you guys have any more stories to share to our audience before we go into the Q&A session?
Just one. I mean, it's related to what you were talking about, but there was a study done recently, a report, and it was done by CB Insights, but they were talking about there's a rising trend, of course, of any applications or businesses that are fulfilling the need for connection and community, especially during COVID, right? And then there was an article that I put here that was related to Asana. So if you're familiar with Asana, right? The company now has actually done really well during COVID. And they're testing that to the fact that they took an opposite approach to Facebook's move fast and break things. And the whole Silicon Valley model is also breaking apart too, because we saw what happened with WeWork, right? Where they just tried to move fast and break things and not care about stuff,
right,
not care about the community and whatnot, which is ironic because they, were all about the community.
right.
And then with Asana, it's really like move slow and repair things. Now, I think it's just because of the times we're in. But I think over the next decade, maybe 10, 20 years, investors are going to favor more of these type of businesses that actually can look at those who see longer term and achieve true sustainability, not just from an ecological standpoint, but from now a money and community standpoint as well, because we're seeing the trickle out effects of these type of decisions.
Right. Wow. Wonderful. Marta, do you have anything to add up?
I mean, I actually, last week, I was in another webinar talking with a guy that runs a remote company, a remote HR company for the software developers. And we were discussing that like community is the future of businesses, of governance, of investment, and that we have to and by we I don't mean people here in this call, because I think we are already on the bandwagon. I mean governments, corporates, VCs, everybody in the ecosystem has to embrace that this is the beginning of the time of the community, and you will eventually have to be on it, and you will actually have to learn to embrace it and learn to respect the community as well. And just one more thing that, and I think I already mentioned that whatever you set up with at the beginning, when you're creating and building a community, when a community is built, it's probably never going to end up like what you set out to do. It's a very elusive thing. It has a mind of its own. It's a creature of its own. It's a combination of a lot of minds that are definitely not your own. So don't get discouraged by that, and just learn to listen to the wisdom of the people, but also block out all the negative and bad vibes.
Yes, because there's also that in communities too.
Yeah, well, talking about the wisdom of the community, well, why don't we invite Mario, our community judge lead, to speak about, briefly the ideas on the community judge and the beauty of that. Mario?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, hey. So thanks a lot. I've been listening in, and I think that a lot of the things that you said first in terms of community, George, that distinction that you made between network and community earlier on, I think was very, very key, where people can sometimes get a little bit confused about what is a network and what is a community. And I think that, in terms of the judging, the challenge and the opportunity is that we're trying to have judges come in who are part of a community, whereas most other accelerators the judging is done through a network, you know? Typical accelerators will bring in judges who are mostly anonymous to the applicants, and they are part of a larger business network, but there is this huge sense of anonymity. Like no one knows, or maybe you do, maybe you don't find out who judged you. But it's this kind of a black box where you put your application in, you get the results, and somehow those results are representative of what you know, certain people think about your company without you really knowing and understanding what happened. In this case, what is happening as soon as people put their application in, everybody can see their application, not just the judges. Um, when they go into the forum, the applicants themselves can start interacting with the community. And I think that one of the most valuable things about bringing the judges in is not just to allocate, you know, like the points to the people who are going to, I guess, eventually, you know, quote unquote, win the program, right? But that process by which judges themselves also get rewarded by their level of helpfulness, I think that that will really create this kind of sense of community. And what I really hope is that through the judging process, that's just an anchor, you know, it helps to synchronize efforts, it helps to synchronize time and messaging, but that at the same time, it's a means to an end, not just of figuring out who gets the most points from the judges, but to drive real engagement, to drive a real two-way engagement between the experts and judges in the community with the actual startups themselves.
Thank you. Yes. So this community judging thing is that, you know, another position that we have in on our Impact Collective community. Uh, well, typically like other like partner judges or fellow judges, um, you can actually learn and listen to the feedbacks of the community members. But this community judge is not just you know, nobody or just like, you know, people without any knowledges, but more like they have this kind of like a backgrounds in their entrepreneur journeys, and or they have this backgrounds in the technological sector or the business perspectives, or even like, you know, as a responsible consumer or activist, they have some footprint in the impact scene as well. So there's kind of like a lot of like diverse community judges will give us more, you know, valid and vivid colors to evaluate the startups in a right way, and that will be calculated into our whole process as well to select the finalist. Well, now that it's time for the FAQ Q&A, I think. So we have this question from Mama You Can, Natalie. So if the type of company is not clear, how do I know which community should I join? Because no other companies have ever did the things we are doing right now. Yes. Do you guys have any ideas, George and Marta?
Oh.
Yeah, go for it, Marta. I'm kind of confused by the question, but yeah, go for it.
I think I know what she means. No, of course, there's no community that's exactly talking about the thing you're doing, but there are communities that somehow are in related industries, related sectors, and there might be people who will be interested in what your company is doing and what your product is about. So start with that, like kind of broaden your horizons, broaden your scope when screening all the communities out there first, and start with that.
Yeah, I don't know if this is a bit too direct, but like there are many startups that think that what they're doing is absolutely unique. I know everybody wants to feel that way, but there's a lot of people who probably have like similar interests, you know, somewhere in the world. So you might just not be looking hard enough. If you indeed like have stumbled upon something where there isn't a community or a group of people who share similar interests, to what you're seeking, then I mean, yeah, you definitely have like a niche possibly there that you could tap into and create it. And yeah, usually if you don't find it around you, you can just create it in your local city or in your area and attract. I think exactly like what Marta did. She found a problem. There wasn't, you know, any sort of startup ecosystem for her that she thought was around. So create it. And so, yeah, I think from that, see what the other...
Alcohol helped us as well, FYI. Not that I recommend it.
Yes, that is a solution right there. Actually, I stopped drinking because of drinking alcohol in Korea about a year ago. You guys can drink. I swear, like, man, yeah, I haven't drank for a year now because of my, yeah, but good stories, good stories.
Yeah, well, what I remember from your application, Baba, you can, it's kind of like related to the parenting service, right? So for that, maybe you can think about other like related industry. So, you know, the community for the baby cares, or community for the pregnancy, or community for the actual like delivery prep and things like that, you know. So the potential customer groups are there, and also the related industry players are also there too. So you can actually, you know, easily connect them, and they will have the most of the needs to utilize your service, so they can give you the feedbacks, and they can be the first initial community for your service as well. And other questions? We can have one or two more questions.
Maybe we can ask each other questions to kind
Yeah.
of, you know, ease up the awkward silence.
Or maybe we can
that
ask for general information about Impact Collective as well. Yeah, not just maybe community. Community is a basic as a default. And if you are here to just ask general question about investment process or anything about the program, please let us know as well.
Yeah, because I see a lot of, you know, startup teams from our first early bird selection are here. So if you have any questions for the next step or the journeys to come, please let us hear. All right, so while waiting for a new question, oh yeah, there are a new question.
How soon do we hear back after submitting the Google form?
I was just checking on Moim, and I think they're uploading new startups as we speak. So soon, hopefully.
Yeah, so basically when you submit the Google form, we first screening the application first, whether there are some missing information or some other, like, you know, unnecessary, what can I say, unnecessary or unfit informations are in. And then after the initial screening, we upload all the applications on our community for the review panel. And that usually takes like a week or two, but we are gonna upload all the applications by 5th of September, because from then we're gonna have a review session with all these experts and judges of our community. And then probably on 17th or 18th of September, you can get the results, that whether you are in the program or not. All right.
What is IC looking for? Angela asked in the chat. Well, I mean, that depends who in the IC community, I suppose.
Well, what we are looking for? Yeah, well, we look for a good startup company who make a positive impact in or for Asia. So we have 6 different themes, as you can see, from our community, like from healthcare to circular economy and green energies and etc. So it almost covers all the sectors of, like, you know, SDG 1 to SDG 16. But then we mostly focus on pre-A to Series A level of company, so that we can, you know, we can financially investing. So the investment readiness is very important. And the second part is the business readiness, the product readiness, so that we want to validate the product or service with our community members. That means that, you know, at least you have to have MVP or working products so that everybody can look into and give you the feedback. And the third part, the third is that, you know, the impact angle that can be matched with your business model. So well, in a broad sense, every innovative startups actually making impact, but we really want to align it with the SDGs. And also we prefer the business that has a core business model well aligned with the impact. So impact product fit is really important as well. The fourth will be the support from the community. So we're looking for the service or product or team that the community can support really enthusiastically. And we think that, you know, that is a kind of like a sustainability test. So if you can actually impress this a whole bunch of diverse community, then you can actually, you know, attract your potential customers and market as well. So that part will be really, really important. That is why we go through this 10 weeks of program with the community members activities. All right. And by the way, congrats to the 21 teams. I think this is our first time meeting some of the founders.
Yeah, there is one more question from Angela. Does the community serve as angel and co-investor in that case?
Oh yeah, why not? Yeah, some of them are actually individual investors or angel investors themselves. So they really want to look for another investment opportunities as well. So also we have this organizations, the investment partner organizations. They have all the rights to co-invest in the portfolio that our Impact Collective Fund invests in. So you are not just only accessible for the direct investment from our fund, but also you have a lot of other opportunities wide open up through our network of investor friends and fellows.
And there is another question from Lee. How can we as a members contribute more to the Moin platform?
Oh, that's really a good question. Well, I think, you know, the first and the most important part is that, you know, participate on the MOIM very actively, like giving comments and ideas and sharing that, you know, sharing any insight that you have, even with the different teams. And I think Lee is from one of our application company, and you can, you know, update your news or some progress whenever it comes, and also you can broadcast it on our open chat as well.
If I can jump on that, because I'm currently spamming the BOIM, the Impact Collective platform. Just use the open chat to interact with people, share cool articles, news from either your region or your industry or sector. And then on your company profile, interact with the judges, ask them questions as well while answering their questions. Give update, like Eunielle said, give updates about your company. Just be out there and be proactive.
Yeah, and also you can bring up a lot of your fellows and your already existing community members as well, so they can support you back, and we can see the vibrant, you know, the vibrant noises for your service as well.
Yeah,
and
this,
another question.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So another question that we have is that this sounds a little bit irrelevant, but what characteristic brings success to an investment? You mean the overall investment of a Impact Collective Fund, or the wide VC terms of the investment? Well, I can answer you back in the perspective of Impact Collective. And for us, the main characteristics will be, obviously, you know, if this is an investment, so will be the financial benefits, financial return, but also what we are looking for is that the impact, how much of impact they make and what kind of impact they make. So we want to see the startups make direct impacts through their business model. So that will be a scalable way of, you know, making positive impact in the world, I think. So through the business, we can make changes and we can resolve the challenges of the global issues. So that is definitely one characteristics we see the success. And Anthony asked, I think the exit to community idea is very interesting. How do you think current angels and VCs see this approach? Also, is the exit mainly via cryptocurrency? I think George can answer back.
Sorry, what was the cryptocurrency? Hold on, I'm looking at it now. I think the exit to community idea is very interesting. How do you think current angels and VCs see this approach? Also, is the exit mainly via cryptocurrency? Okay, cool. So I'm not too sure. I think the exit to community is just a general idea, right? That's it doesn't rely on cryptocurrency or not. But I can see how, yeah, there could be a mechanism. I think this was the whole idea behind the ICOs in a way. And also, if you look at sort of cooperatives, this is coming out a lot as well, which very much lends itself to a community-driven model when it comes to business. And I think there are definitely blockchain-based cryptocurrency projects where they're looking at, yeah, how can they're calling it decentralize the ownership, and how can they have it so that users could actually benefit in terms of ownership through a dynamic equity structure from merely participating on a platform, which is quite complicated and wasn't actually possible until the invention of micropayments. So I think in terms of business models, this is actually what we're looking at for a secret startup we have at the moment. We're looking at in the future because we see probably in the next decade that this is going to be made possible, and it's going to be very interesting to see.
Yeah, well, actually, there are a lot of different models that can be applied to the exit to community. So it can be direct sales of the cryptocurrencies or some kind of like a shares, but also it can be a shared ownership through other types of the corporate structure. So instead of the, the stock-based corporate, but you can go to the community-led company kind of like structure. So it's already available as a legal structure in many of the European countries, and I know that it can be happen to the United States as well. And a lot of Asian countries also looking for the alternative types of the corporate structure as well. So I think that can be also another case of the exit to community. And can the company both get the fast track and the normal program investment? Yes. So you can get the double the chance, So for the fast track investment, usually it's from the IC fund first, but then for the program investment, you have other options to get another investment from our partner investment organizations as well. And if you get selected as a finalist, you have another options to sign up. To negotiate with different terms and different different organizations together. So yes, so that's why we recommend, even if you get the fast track investment from our side, go through whole process so that you can reach out to wider investment opportunities with different groups and different options as well.
And then one more question from Angela. Are they standard term for the IC for all the startups?
Oh, not really, because I know that a lot of accelerator models actually have a standardized term sheets. So it's kind of like a fixed valuation or fixed terms or fixed type of the equity investment. But for us, we have like over 60 times of investment experiences, and every deal was different. So we know that the valuation will be different, and the regulation of each country will be different too, and the preferences of the founders will be different. So the terms will be totally one-on-one and customizable. But obviously it's an equity investment, so it's not a grant or it's not an equity-free investment. So you should consider that we're gonna, if we go into the investment negotiation, then that's the equity deal. The last question will be, do you have tips how to make impact more measurable? Wow. This is really a big topic. So we have another impact pillar and impact committee to help this out. I mean, there are a lot of efforts you can do, or a lot of tools that you can implement to measure your impact. But it also depends on the business model and what kind of impact you want to measure. So depending on those characteristics or categories of the impact, you can either apply some metrics, or you can align with your KPI modeling, or you can align with the business reports. There are a lot of other options that you can actually try to. So if you get into our program and if you get into the camp, there will be an impact course, which is kind of like it's not a course, but impact workshop, so that you can have a look at a lot of various types of the measurable impacts tools and kits, so that we can cater your needs and what will be the best suitable for your business model. And any more ideas, Songi? Because Songi is one of the impact committee member. So maybe if you want to add up, then you can, feel free to.
Well, there were like many things I could have added, but I think it's time is up. It's 9:20. My role here today is technicians and support facilitator. So I will pass that note. I think Uni did a good job on explaining the impact one. Just apply, and then we plan, because like it's although it's an impact investment project. Sorry, the impact is considered very, very important pillar. So we have like other experts coming all together and creating an impact pillar to support the impact measurement, assessment, and the tracking. So just apply, then you will see how it works.
Okay. Wow. Thank you very much, everybody, for your time and, like patience and also for the insightful talks tonight with our panelists. If any of you have further questions or interest, either about Impact Collective or the topics we covered tonight, please feel free to reach out by emailing us at hi@impactcollective.earth. Or you can, easily reach out to us directly on our community, impactcollective.moim.co. So feel free to join anytime and just, share your ideas and share your insights with a bunch of the peer entrepreneurs and experts and investors. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. And
Thank
see,
you.
well, I'm on